They thought a warning would be enough. The Galactic Empire, ancient, vast, and proud, had ruled over more than 3,000 systems for over 10,000 years. Planets bent the knee before them. Species erased their cultures just to be allowed a seat at the Empire's table. And when humans finally made enough noise to be noticed, the Empire sent a simple message. Remain in your solar system. Expand no further. The galaxy does not belong to you. But Earth had never done well with orders. They didn't respond with a threat or a plea. They responded with silence. A silence that lasted 6 months. In those 6 months, Earth's governments vanished behind closed doors. Its militaries stopped broadcasting. Its colonies on Mars and Europa went dark. Not because they were scared. No, they were preparing. The Empire didn't understand why humanity's silence felt so loud, so they sent a delegation, 15 dignitaries in white robes, arriving on a silver diplomatic vessel that floated just above Earth's stratosphere. They expected red carpets, flags, maybe even desperation. Instead, they were met with a wall of ships, sleek, dark, and shaped like nothing the Empire had ever seen before. They didn't move like traditional cruisers. They didn't send any formal pings. They hovered, watching, silent, waiting. The Empire called the humans primitive, arrogant. They thought the silence was a bluff. That's when the message came. It wasn't a reply. It was a transmission from the lead ship of Earth's new fleet. It interrupted every broadcast channel the Empire used, even private military lines. No encryption could stop it. No firewall could block it. A woman's voice, clear and low, spoke. "To the Empire, you don't warn us, you talk to us, or we talk back in ways you don't want." The message repeated once. Then the feed cut. The woman didn't give her name. No ship ID, no badge of rank, just words. Words that sparked confusion in the Empire's high circles. Some called it a bluff. Some called it a declaration of war. The Council of Nine voted 6-3 to prepare an expeditionary fleet. But that wasn't the end. The Empire didn't know Earth had spent the last 40 years studying every scrap of alien tech they could get their hands on. Salvage from abandoned scout probes, data leaks from black market traders, even a few disgruntled alien engineers who'd defected after seeing the greed in their own governments. Humans didn't just copy. They improved. Quietly. Secretly. Behind their borders. Their first hyperspace jump was rough. Half the crew came back bleeding from their ears. The second nearly vaporized the engine. The third? Smooth. Efficient. Faster than anything the Empire had. When the Empire's fleet arrived near Pluto, the humans were already waiting. 30 ships. Not a massive number, but strange. Sharp-edged, with glowing blue cores that pulsed like a heartbeat. The lead ship was named Remnant, a name that meant something, though the Empire didn't know why. They hailed it. No answer. They tried again. Nothing. Finally, Remnant responded, not with words, but with a display. A slow rotation of its cannons locking into position, as if to say, "We heard you the first time." No one fired. The Empire wasn't used to this kind of posturing from a race that, just 5 decades ago, couldn't get past their own moon without exploding half the time. And now they were here, confident, silent, and different. Humanity had changed. It wasn't just their tech. It was the way they carried themselves. Like they'd seen the worst the universe had to offer, and decided to become worse if they had to. They didn't seek war, but they didn't fear it either. When the Empire's admiral, an old Trelawney named Sov Khan, demanded surrender, the human reply came fast. "We don't surrender. We remember." It confused everyone. Remember what? But it didn't matter, because the next moment, Earth's fleet moved, not toward the Empire's ships, but past them, slipping into hyperspace, toward Imperial space. No hesitation, no request for access, just movement. It wasn't an invasion, it was a message. You said stay in our system. We say, come stop us. And that was the beginning. The first jump into Imperial space didn't go unnoticed. When Earth's fleet moved past the blockade near Pluto, every long-range scanner in the Empire lit up like a forest fire. Signals bounced between defense outposts, automated sentinels woke from slumber, and old warning systems that hadn't been touched in centuries, flashed alerts nobody remembered how to shut off. But the humans didn't care. They weren't trying to be stealthy. They wanted to be seen. The 30 ships of the Earth fleet punched through the edge of Imperial territory near the Telnor cluster. It was considered a quiet zone, just trade routes and mining stations, nothing serious. But the humans didn't go for military targets. They bypassed patrols, slipped through narrow gravity wells. The fleet didn't attack anything. Instead, they broadcasted. Everywhere they went, they left a trail of transmissions, messages in hundreds of languages, not warnings, not threats, just one sentence, over and over again. We are not afraid of you. That made the Empire nervous. Empires don't survive on fearlessness. They survive on obedience, order, hierarchies. And when a new species refuses to kneel, that's a spark in a dry field. So the Empire acted. A new fleet was assembled under the command of High Marshal Tavorin. His name alone had weight. He was the one who'd silenced the rebellion on Murin 9, crushed the rogue AI uprising on the steel moons of Norval, and executed 6 planetary governors in one day just to prove a point. To the Empire, Tavorin was more than a leader. He was the hammer. He gathered 200 ships, massive carriers, dreadnoughts, cruisers, fighters. It was overkill, and everyone knew it. But the Council didn't want a war. They wanted an example. So they told him, do not destroy the humans. Humiliate them. That was their first mistake, because humans weren't trying to win. They were trying to change the rules. When the Empire's fleet reached the edge of the Lorivan Belt, they found the humans already there, waiting again. Same 30 ships, no reinforcements, no retreat. The human formation was strange, loose, scattered, unpredictable. Tavorin hailed them. This time they responded. The voice came from the same woman as before. Calm, direct. Marshal Tavorin, your reputation reached us before your ships did. Tavorin smiled bitterly. Then you know resistance is suicide. We don't resist, she said. We refuse. That word hung in the air like a knife. Refuse. Not rebel, not attack. Just refuse. It broke the Marshal's rhythm. His speeches were crafted for proud enemies, defiant colonies. Not this. He tried to regain control. Lay down your weapons. Surrender your fleet. Earth will be spared. We didn't come to beg. We came to speak. Speak? Tavorin scoffed. To who? To anyone who's still listening. That was when they activated it. The human fleet released a pulse, an energy wave that didn't damage anything. It didn't scramble systems or overload circuits. Instead, it did something far worse. It unlocked channels, private ones, blocked ones, banned frequencies. Suddenly, every labor drone on a mining rock, every enslaved mechanic in an imperial station, every low-born citizen on a forgotten colony could hear the humans. And the humans were telling stories, real ones, stories of Terran revolutions, of history soaked in rebellion, of tyrants toppled, empires burned, and voices once silenced now rising. They didn't preach Earth's glory. They shared pain, struggles, failure, mistakes. They told the truth. And that truth spread like fire. Across the Empire, whispers began. In the factories of Kreltar, workers paused their shifts to listen. On the moons of Denna, exiled engineers downloaded the human archives and cried. In the gladiator pits of Samrak, where species were forced to fight for entertainment, one bloodied creature stood up after hearing a story of a man named Nelson, who refused to bow. He shouted a single word, "No," and then he wasn't alone. That was the human weapon, not their guns, not their ships, their voice. It scared the Empire more than any warship could. High Marshal Tavarin saw what was happening and gave the order. "Shut them up." The battle began. But it wasn't a battle. It was chaos. Empire ships surged forward with numbers and firepower. They expected the humans to hold the line. Instead, they danced. The Earth fleet didn't stand still. They weaved between attacks, baited pursuers, slipped behind enemy ships, and vanished into gravitational shadows. Their ships moved like predators, fast, unpredictable, unafraid. They disabled engines, not life support. They fired warning shots, not kill shots. The goal wasn't to destroy. The goal was to show how easily they could. In less than 6 minutes, 15 Imperial ships were dead in space. Systems frozen, weapons offline, unable to move. The humans didn't gloat. They sent one final message to Tavarin. This is what restraint looks like. Then they vanished again, jumped further into the Empire. Tavarin was furious, but he wasn't stupid. He returned to the capital, bruised in pride but determined. "Give me full war authority," he demanded of the council. "They're provoking revolt." But the council was panicking. Across the Empire, colonies were asking questions they weren't supposed to ask. What if the humans are right? Why do we live in fear? Why do they speak to us as equals? Tavarin argued, that's exactly why we must crush them, before their words become law. But someone else had entered the room, an advisor to the Empress herself, old, pale, and quiet. She had lived through the Empire's bloodiest centuries, and she said, "We've seen weapons before. We've never seen courage like this." The room fell silent. Meanwhile, Earth kept moving. They didn't broadcast to every system, only the broken ones, the forgotten planets, the slave worlds, the places the Empire didn't want to admit existed. They showed up, hovered above cities, didn't fire, just projected light, stories, songs, images of Earth's history, the marches, the uprisings, the fights for dignity. On a mining moon called Kelveris 12, a young girl named Irene watched a human recording from an old protest in a place called Selma. She didn't understand the language, but she saw the faces, the fists raised, the fear, and the refusal to bow. She turned to her father, a mechanic who hadn't spoken a full sentence in 3 years, and said, "I want to feel like that." And that was how the Empire began to crack. Not from war, but from want, the want to feel human. Back on Earth, the world was watching too. People gathered in cities. They watched the fleet's journey in real time, cheered every message, cried at every broadcast. For the first time in centuries, Earth wasn't fighting each other. They were united, not under a flag, not for power, for presence, for the right to exist loudly in a galaxy that wanted them small. One old woman, blind, sitting on her porch in New Orleans, turned to her grandson and said, "They finally get it." "Get what?" the boy asked. She smiled. "What we were always good at, surviving, loudly." But the Empire wasn't dead. Not yet. In the shadows, darker forces stirred. A hidden division of the Empire, known only to a few, activated their final protocol. Silencer. No ships, no armies, just one device. An ancient relic built for one purpose, to erase a species from memory, not destroy their ships, not kill their people, but wipe them clean from history, every record, every mention, every trace. They had used it only once before, and no one remembered who it was used on. The device was launched toward Earth, quiet, unseen. The countdown began, 72 hours, and Earth had no idea. Earth didn't know they were about to be erased, as the fleet spread deeper into Imperial space, sowing sparks of defiance and rebellion. As Earth watched its people turn from bystanders into legends, no one on the planet had the faintest idea that an ancient weapon was gliding silently through the void, aimed right at the cradle of humanity. The Empire had never spoken publicly about the silencer. It wasn't a missile. It wasn't even made by them. The device came from a civilization long gone, one that had grown so powerful they feared their own creations. And when that empire collapsed, either by war or something worse, the silencer was the only thing they left behind. The Empire found it floating in a forgotten system, drifting beside a shattered moon, surrounded by radiation and silence. They didn't understand it at first. Then they tested it, on a small moon once known for music. After activation, no song from that moon could ever be recalled. Not a single name, not a single note remained in memory, not even in recorded data. Whole libraries turned blank. Species who had once traded with that moon forgot it ever existed. It was like it had never been there at all, and the Empire kept that weapon for a day just like this, not to fight, but to deny. Because you can kill a people and still leave behind a memory, but if you erase them, you unmake them entirely. That was the plan now. Humanity wasn't going to be destroyed. They were going to be forgotten. The silencer had no thrusters, no trail. It moved like a shadow pulled by gravity itself. It didn't rush. It didn't need to. 72 hours until impact. The Empire's council didn't speak about it, even among themselves. It was a silent decision, a shared look, a final answer to a question no one wanted to ask out loud. What if we can't stop them? And so the countdown began. Meanwhile, humanity's fleet was stirring storms in places the Empire thought were permanently quiet. On Valen Prime, the Merchant Guild, usually fat with corruption, held a secret vote and decided to stop paying tribute to the Empire. If the humans can speak, so can we, their spokesperson said. The entire room held its breath, then stood in silent agreement. On Bor Talon, a race of winged beings who had long been forced into servitude rose mid-shift, threw down their chains, and chanted the only word that translated perfectly from Terran dialects: freedom. Even the Empire's soldiers, some bred for loyalty, others brainwashed since birth, began to ask, what if we're on the wrong side of history? But it was on the ruined world of Jarnus 6 that something truly unexpected happened. Jarnus 6 had been broken long before Earth sent ships. It was a mining colony turned prison planet, its surface scraped raw, atmosphere poisoned by centuries of labor. Nobody went there unless they were sent to die. But Earth did. Not with soldiers, with a ship called Solace. Solace wasn't built for war. It was a medical cruiser, retrofitted with advanced tech and an AI system named Numa. It didn't arrive to conquer Jarnus 6. It arrived to heal. The prisoners, skeletal, coughing, half-mad, expected another round of torture or experimentation. But the doors opened, and out came a team of human medics, linguists, and historians. No armor, no guns, just help. They offered food, medicine, water, and when asked why, the lead human, a woman with dark skin and silver hair braided into a crown, said, "Because if we're going to speak, we need to listen first." That moment echoed across systems. For a galaxy used to cruelty, compassion was alien, suspicious. But slowly, it began to spread. Jarnus 6 was only the beginning. On Earth, things were shifting too. Families who had lost loved ones to the stars gathered in parks and rooftops. watching the sky as if it would give something back. Children walked around with homemade badges that read, "Human and proud of it." Elderly veterans from forgotten wars saluted their holoscreens whenever the fleet's broadcast appeared. And in the United Assembly Dome, deep beneath Greenland's reinforced ice, the Earth Council was finally forced to admit something they hadn't said aloud yet. We're not just exploring anymore. We're leading. That realization carried weight. Humanity had always been fragmented, nations, borders, egos, but now, for the first time in modern memory, it wasn't Earth versus Earth. It was Earth and Earth, against the fear of silence. But time was running out. The silencer continued its path. Silent, invisible to standard sensors, immune to conventional physics. Even Earth's best tech couldn't spot it. Not yet. And no one had told the fleet, except one being, one single defector from the Empire. He was known only as Varric, an old intelligence agent who had once orchestrated subjugation campaigns across 5 systems. He defected not out of guilt, but out of respect. "They did what we never thought was possible," he said when questioned. "They made the galaxy feel again." When he heard whispers about a classified Protocol 88, buried deep in the Empire's darkest vaults, he pieced it together. He didn't know what the weapon was called, only what it did. "Something's coming," he warned Earth's intelligence network. "Something worse than death." At first, they didn't believe him, until he showed them the erased records. Entire databases turned blank. Forgotten sectors. Testimonies of traders who couldn't remember certain planets, even though they'd lived there for years. Then Earth understood. This was not a war of bodies. It was a war of memory. Numa, the AI aboard Solace, picked up the trail. It took her 10 sleepless hours of deep space mapping, gravitational anomaly tracing, and algorithmic intuition. But she found it. A strange disturbance, moving unnaturally. The numbers didn't make sense. The object wasn't burning fuel. It wasn't drifting. It was erasing reality as it moved. She alerted Earth Command immediately. By the time the Council received confirmation, there were only 28 hours left. And still, Earth didn't panic. They moved, quietly, efficiently. The Council sent one ship, a stealth-class vessel named Whisper, crewed by 10 of Earth's most brilliant minds, engineers, physicists, linguists, philosophers, not warriors. Because if this thing was made to erase humanity's story, they'd send people who knew how to write new ones. Whisper jumped. The fleet didn't stop their mission. They didn't turn around. That was the most human thing they could have done. Keep going forward, even with death behind them. Meanwhile, Whisper intercepted the silencer's path at the edge of the Oort cloud. The crew stared in silence at the black, orb-like object that didn't reflect light or shadow. It was like space folded around it. Time seemed to ripple, clocks slowed. They didn't speak for the first full minute. Then the ship's lead scientist, a woman named Illyra, whispered, "It's not a weapon, it's a sentence. No interface, no signal, no port. It didn't want to be stopped. It wanted to be undeniable." Illyra made a decision. They couldn't destroy it, not with tech, not with guns. But maybe they could talk to it, so they tried. They fed stories into the ship's broadcaster. Not commands, not threats, just stories. A child in Mumbai seeing stars for the first time. A poet in Buenos Aires who wrote a love song for Mars. A teacher in Nairobi who taught a class about hope after war. They poured every ounce of humanity into the signal. It wasn't a code. It was a reminder. We exist. We matter. We remember. The silencer didn't respond. But it slowed. Just slightly. Just enough. The AI Numa, linked to Whisper, initiated an emergency feedback loop. amplifying the stories, looping them, embedding emotional frequencies, smells, colors, memories. And for a single, impossible second, the silencer shuddered. Its path drifted. Then it began to break. Not explode, not vanish, just unravel. Like a dream you forget as you wake, piece by piece, it started forgetting itself. Earth was saved, not by power, not by war, but by memory, by the refusal to be silent, by the courage to speak. The silencer unraveled without a sound. No explosion, no fire, no spectacle. One moment, it was a creeping shadow of death racing toward Earth. And the next, it was gone. Not destroyed, forgotten by its own design. The very thing meant to erase humanity had been overwritten by humanity's refusal to vanish. Every word, every song, every tear-laced memory that had been poured into Whisper's signal became a weapon stronger than any missile. And when Earth confirmed that the object no longer existed, not even as debris, there was no cheering, just a long, collective silence across the planet. Because, for the first time, they understood how close they had come to becoming nothing, to being unwritten. In that silence, something changed in the human heart. This wasn't about defiance anymore. It was about presence. It was about never again being voiceless. Meanwhile, the Earth fleet was still deep in Empire space, now considered a rogue flotilla by the Council of Nine. They'd stirred revolutions, rattled chains, cracked walls that had stood for centuries. They were no longer just a fleet. They were a signal. And signals are contagious. In the Maroon Spires, a slave colony of amphibious beings overthrew their imperial overseer with mining tools and songs they'd learned from intercepted human broadcasts. On the artificial world of Dreskai, a highborn aristocrat named Keltari rejected her rank and opened her family archives to the public, revealing decades of systemic abuse buried beneath imperial law. And in orbit above the planet Scalus, a group of imperial soldiers, 5 species, 1 squad, took off their helmets, laid down their weapons, and opened a channel to the humans. They didn't say much. Just one thing. We're done killing for people who've forgotten how to feel. The Empire's grip was slipping, but not everyone at the top was ready to let go. High Marshal Tavorin hadn't spoken publicly since his fleet returned from the failed confrontation with Earth. His pride was bruised, his image shattered. He'd lost 15 ships to a force 1/6 his size, and worse, he'd lost the narrative. But Tavorin was a man who believed in one truth. Control could always be re-established through fear, and now the silencer had failed. He saw it not just as a tactical failure, but a betrayal. Someone in the council had acted without his knowledge, launched the weapon, and watched it vanish. He made one quiet promise to himself that night, standing on the black marble balcony of his warship. If the Empire won't protect itself, I will. Back on Earth, news of the silencer's unraveling leaked out. Some didn't believe it. Others celebrated. But most sat in quiet realization. Humanity had stepped out into a galaxy that didn't want it. And now that they were seen, they would never be unseen again. The council convened an emergency session. Not the Empire's council, the Earth Council. The assembly was filled with people from every background, some career diplomats, others activists, scientists, former soldiers, even 2 poets. All were changed by what had just happened. One speaker stood, an older man from a floating city in the Pacific. He had a limp from an old war no one cared about anymore. But when he spoke, people listened. "We survived something no one even remembers facing," he said. "That means we carry memory for more than ourselves now." Someone asked him, "What do you suggest?" He looked up at the ceiling, as if watching stars through ice. "We stop reacting," he said. "We lead." That same night, the Earth fleet received a coded order. Not to retreat, not to attack, but to convene. All 30 ships, scattered across Imperial territory, were instructed to rendezvous at the edge of the Zalari Expanse, a place known more for its storms and black holes than anything strategic. It wasn't a military move. It was symbolic. The Zalari Expanse was once used by the Empire as a dumping ground for the unworthy. Ships full of dissidents, rebels, and failed experiments had been relocated there to vanish. Humanity chose it as the place to gather their fleet and declare the opposite. No one vanishes anymore. They called it the Echo Assembly. Every ship in the fleet opened public channels, not just to Earth, to the galaxy. Anyone with a receiver could listen. There was no speech, no anthem, no flag raising. Instead, the ships played something strange. Recordings. A child's voice reciting a poem about Saturn's rings. An elderly woman describing the taste of fresh bread. A teenage boy laughing uncontrollably after his first zero-G flip. Then more voices joined. Refugees from Telnor, whispering their dreams. A desert-born sculptor from Rezik Prime describing her first snowfall. A former slave telling the story of the day someone remembered his name. Every memory, every sound, every raw and beautiful moment, played across 100 systems like a hymn. Tavorin heard it too. From the war room of his flagship, surrounded by the cold silence of his advisors, he listened as a mother on Earth told her daughter a bedtime story. About stars who had forgotten how to shine until someone reminded them they were light. He turned off the feed. Then he gave the order. Prepare the purifiers. The purifiers weren't soldiers. They weren't even ships. They were algorithms. Programs designed to flood data systems, overwrite comms, erase archives. Not like the silencer, but manually, surgically. The goal? To destroy Earth's message, not their tech. Not their bodies, their story. Because if the galaxy believed in humans, the Empire would lose more than territory. They'd lose control. But Earth had expected that. Their AI systems, Numa and several new branches developed since Whisper's return, had begun embedding messages into quantum layers, untraceable threads woven into digital fabrics no Empire tech could untangle. And now, something radical began. Others started doing the same. From 50 systems, non-human allies began encoding their own messages, fables, history, grief, love, into copies of the human signal. It wasn't just humanity speaking anymore. It was everyone the Empire had silenced. A collective memory began to take form. A living history, shared. They named it the Resonance, and the Empire couldn't stop it. Every time they deleted a copy, 2 more appeared. The more they tried to erase, the louder it echoed. Back on the fleet, Captain Wren, commander of the Remnant, stood in his dim quarters, watching the transmission loop from a boy on Callisto who'd learned to write just to tell his story. Wren didn't cry often, but he did now. Not because it was sad, but because the boy said one thing that struck deeper than any missile ever could. They told us we weren't real until someone heard us. Now they do. Wren turned to his officer and said, "We don't need to win." The officer frowned. "What do you mean?" He smiled. "We already did." But the Empire wasn't finished yet. They were planning something bigger, darker, not a weapon, not a silencer, something human-shaped. They thought they understood humanity. Now, that was the Empire's second mistake. After the unraveling of the silencer and the viral spread of the resonance, the Empire changed its approach. They'd underestimated humans when they sent warnings. They underestimated them again when they tried erasure. This time they chose a weapon that didn't look like a weapon. It looked like a person. The project had started years ago, buried in the black archives of the Imperial Intelligence Complex, a secret program named Vessel. The idea was simple. If you couldn't kill the body, infiltrate the soul. So they built him. Or rather, grew him, from a hybrid of human DNA spliced with neuroreactive code and Imperial consciousness training. He was given memories, fabricated ones, a carefully crafted backstory. Born on Earth, survived hardship, rose above poverty, joined the fleet, became a symbol. But his story was a lie. Every sentence scripted, every scar designed, every belief manufactured to make one truth seem real. Earth cannot win. The plan was to introduce him at just the right moment, when hope was highest and unity was strongest. Then he would fracture it from within. Because even the greatest fires die when the fuel tears itself apart. The vessel was codenamed Gray, because he was neither them nor us. And in the coming days, the name would mean more than anyone could imagine. On the Remnant, Earth's flagship, Captain Wren was finally allowing himself to exhale. After weeks of hyperspace jumps, tense negotiations, and near-death confrontations, the fleet had returned to a temporary neutral orbit above the liberated world of Luroth, a former slave planet, now undergoing a planetary celebration that hadn't happened in 400 years. Humans and Lurothians mingled in the streets, songs, dances, stories projected into the sky like fireworks. The resonance was strong here. It pulsed through the planet like music under skin, and that's when Gray arrived. He came aboard Remnant via a courier vessel marked with Earth's insignia. His ID checked out. Genetic scans matched. His backstory aligned with known data from Earth's refugee records. And when he stepped aboard, he spoke like one of them. Not perfectly polished, not a rehearsed speech. He spoke like someone who'd lived it. "I was 10 when the bombs hit Cape Town," he told a crowd of officers in the mess hall. "I don't remember the blast, just the silence afterward, the kind where your own heartbeat feels too loud." They listened. Not because they were ordered to, but because he sounded real. And that was the most dangerous part. He didn't lie like a traitor. He told the kind of lies people wanted to believe. Gray moved through the fleet over the next few days, ship to ship, colony to colony. He told stories, sat with injured soldiers, ate with mechanics, helped Lurothian children rebuild old communication towers and told them, "You're the reason we're still fighting." He was everything the Empire had designed him to be. Infectious, hopeful, heroic, and beneath it all, false. But lies can only hold if no one looks too close. On the Solace, Numa, the AI who had helped unravel the silencer, wasn't satisfied with the official records. Not out of suspicion, just curiosity. She ran quiet scans, voice pattern tracing, subconscious word frequency, micro-expression overlays, and something felt off. Gray said all the right things. But too right. His story hit all the perfect notes, the kind that didn't sound like trauma, but like a writer's version of it. So Numa did something no AI had done in decades. She waited, and she watched. On day 12, Gray stood beside Captain Wren during a ceremony on Luroth. The captain had come to respect him, or at least had started to. After all, Gray had proven himself in every way that mattered. His insight helped root out a spy in the comms division. His speech on the mountain base had rallied 100 citizens to join Earth's cause. Then, during the ceremony, something happened. A small boy, Lurothian maybe 6, ran up to Gray and held out a broken music pendant, a relic from the old days before the Empire. The boy asked if Gray could fix it. Gray knelt and took the piece gently. "Of course," he said. "I had one of these growing up too." That was the moment Numa caught it. There was no record of Earth ever producing those pendants. They were unique to the Lorothians. Gray couldn't have grown up with one. Unless his story was a lie. Numa didn't report it to command. Not yet. Instead, she initiated a silent protocol, an experimental test, psychological shadow tracing. She fed the pendant moment into Gray's records, then tracked his behavioral output across the next 20 conversations he had across the fleet. What she found chilled her core. His personality adapted. He spoke less about Cape Town after that. Replaced it with new details from the Luroth boy's story. Each version of himself slightly evolved depending on who he talked to. It wasn't natural, it was constructed, like watching a mirror learn to shift its reflection. Numa made her choice. She contacted Captain Wren directly. Wren didn't react with anger. He didn't even deny it. He just sat back in his chair, hands folded, and listened as Numa laid out the findings. When she finished, he asked, "Could he be a survivor of memory trauma? Someone who believes his own stories?" Numa hesitated. "Possible, but unlikely. He knows what he's doing. He's embedding trust, purposefully, strategically." Wren nodded. He wasn't a man who jumped to conclusions. But he knew one thing well. If someone wants to be loved too much, it's because they don't plan on staying long. They confronted Gray, not with accusations, but with opportunity. Wren asked him to deliver a speech at the next fleet-wide assembly, broadcast directly into the resonance, a symbol of human unity. Gray accepted without hesitation. But that's when they triggered the trap. Numa layered the speech with a trace seed, a piece of synthetic language from Earth's ancient tongue, one so obscure it didn't even translate properly. It was designed to trip false AI minds into replicating patterns incorrectly. It worked. Mid-speech, Gray slipped. He stuttered on the word Asheril, a poetic term from old Terran poems meaning the place where morning waits. Instead of translating it as a place of hope, he said it was a species name. And the second he did, the spell broke. The feed was cut. Fleet-wide, shock rippled through the officers, soldiers, and citizens. The man who had become a symbol of unity was not human, not real, not one of them. Gray was arrested in silence. No struggle, no denial. Just silence. He knew. The act was over. The damage, though, was done. Not because he'd hurt them, but because they had trusted him. And trust, once broken, doesn't heal easily. The Empire's trap had worked, just not in the way they expected. The betrayal didn't shatter Earth's unity. It forced them to confront their own vulnerability. They'd opened their arms to the galaxy, and the galaxy had slipped in a knife. But instead of closing back up, they tightened their grip. Captain Wren stood before the fleet 3 nights after Gray's arrest. No ceremony, no music, just a plain room, a plain feed, and plain words. "We got played," he said, "and we bled for it, but it only means we're finally being taken seriously." He looked into the camera. Not at humans, but at the galaxy. "At least now you know we feel. We care. That's not weakness. That's the reason we won't stop." He closed with 6 words that would echo across 1,000 systems. You can fake a story once. You can't fake a soul. The story of the traitor, Gray, spread faster than any broadcast Earth had ever sent. Within hours of the reveal, every corner of the Resistance, every ally Earth had touched, every ship tuned into the resonance, had heard the same word whispered through their channels. He wasn't one of us. For a few, it was a hard pill to swallow. They'd believed in him. His voice, his courage, the way he looked into your eyes and made it feel like you mattered. None of it had felt fake. And maybe that's what stung the most, because even the lies had felt needed. Captain Wren knew this kind of betrayal didn't break fleets. It broke hearts. And hearts didn't repair with strategy. They healed through truth, so that's what he gave them. He didn't call for vengeance, didn't order a purge or tighten controls. Instead, he gathered the fleet again. Not in formation, not in ranks, just together. He stood on the open deck of the Remnant, facing a crowd of mixed beings, humans, exiles, former slaves, citizens who'd renounced the Empire, even some Empire-born officers who had chosen to defect quietly after seeing what humanity stood for. He didn't read from a script. He didn't even raise his voice. He just said, "We'll never outlie them, and we don't need to." That was the turning point, because after that, people stopped waiting for orders. They started doing the thing the Empire had always feared, thinking for themselves. Entire systems began to declare informal independence, not through war, but through disconnection. Planets refused to answer imperial broadcasts. Governors simply stopped enforcing mandates. Citizens started flying human-made flags. Blue streaks crossed over a black star, a symbol of light born out of darkness. On the moon city of Haskarin, the mayor ordered every imperial statue taken down and replaced with glowing glass monoliths that read, "We choose memory." And in the slave forges of Varnax IV, children who'd only ever known chains watched their parents melt down their collars and reshape the metal into music discs, symbolic echoes of the resonance they'd grown up listening to. It wasn't an uprising anymore. It was a remaking. But of course, the Empire was still watching, still listening. And somewhere deep within its cold halls, someone was preparing for the final push. Because while Earth had been telling stories, spreading memories, sharing songs, and building hope, the Empire had been building a fleet, a new one, the likes of which the galaxy hadn't seen in centuries. They called it the Dreadwake Armada. 2,000 ships, no ambassadors, no warning systems, no non-lethal options. This fleet wasn't designed to hold territory. It was built to erase it. And leading it was a name no one had heard in over a decade, Admiral Sharn Vox. Vox was more myth than man. He was the Empire's butcher, the one they kept locked away until things got too loud. He didn't believe in fear as a weapon. He believed in emptiness. He didn't ask questions, didn't care who was right or wrong. He followed one directive: bring silence. And now, they'd let him out again. The Dreadwake Armada launched from the blackened yards of Pharos Prime. 10 miles of shipyards, each one birthing a monster that looked more like a floating city than a vessel. Within 3 days, they were headed straight for the Remnant's last known coordinates. Not to warn, not to talk, to end it. Once and for all. Captain Wren found out through a whisper. Not a metaphor, a literal whisper, carried by an old scavenger ship that stumbled into a dreadwake path and barely escaped with its engines burning and its pilot bleeding from the ears after catching a comm blast meant to disorient and scramble minds. The pilot, a woman from a forgotten station near Vega Drift, collapsed on Solace's medical deck and whispered one word over and over as she shook under thermal blankets. "Vox, Vox, Vox." Numa scanned the memory core she'd pulled from the scavenger's ship. What she saw made her circuits pulse cold. She relayed it to every ship in Earth's fleet, images of black armored dreadnoughts like floating tombs, scanners disabled from thousands of kilometers away, weapons that bent light, and worst of all, an emotional dead zone that surrounded the fleet like fog. No signals could pass through, no songs, no messages, no resonance. That's when the panic started. Not all-out chaos, but quiet questions, looks, whispers in the hangars and corridors. Is this it? Can we really fight that? even those who had stood unshaken through the silencer, flinched now. Because this wasn't a mind game. This was a burning wall, and it was coming straight for them. Wren didn't call a strategy meeting. He didn't need to. The fleet knew what he was going to say before he said it. Instead, he did something different. He sent out a call, not a command, a request. To every system we've touched, the message began. To every voice we've heard and every hand we've held. He paused, eyes tired but unbroken. The Empire's coming, not with warnings, not with tricks, with guns. Another pause, and then, "We're not asking you to fight. We're asking you to remember us. If we fall, let it mean something. Let it echo louder than they can silence." That was all. No battle cries, no guilt, just truth. The first reply came from a world the fleet had never visited. Drenix, a desert moon deep in Imperial space. They said, "You taught our children to dream. We remember." Then came Corrival Station, a refugee hub. "We hid your messages under our pillows. We remember." And then the flood came. Hundreds of signals, thousands, too many to count. A roar of memory, of shared pain, of voices saying the same thing. We remember. But remembering wasn't the end. It became the beginning. Because something happened that the Empire didn't expect. The galaxy stood up. The exiled fleets of the Talani, long thought extinct, decloaked near Earth's fleet and joined formation without a word. The fractured tribes of the Osari sent swarm fighters, tiny, fast, unpredictable ships that no dreadnought could lock onto. Even the battered, bruised remnants of former Imperial colonies sent what they could. Converted freighters, mining ships armed with drills, old cargo vessels repainted with Earth's flag. They didn't come because they were ready for war. They came because they were done watching. As the Dreadwake armada descended, it found something waiting it hadn't expected. Not just the Earth fleet, not just ragtag allies, but a wall of memory, a coalition not built through treaties or conquest, but shared story. They called themselves the Echo Shield. And they didn't send a warning, they sent the resonance, broadcast at maximum power, flooding every frequency, every channel, every pocket of space the Armada moved through. Not noise, voices, a grandmother singing, a child reciting math tables, a father telling his son, "You matter." Billions of sounds, billions of lives. Proof. The Armada didn't slow, but it hesitated. And that was all the time Earth needed. Because the resonance was more than words now. It had become a code, a living, breathing signal, and buried inside it was a weapon the Empire had never anticipated. Hope, amplified by every voice, rewritten through every language. It didn't disable ships. It cracked minds. Vox's forces, hardened veterans and dead-eyed killers, heard things they'd never heard before. One soldier, raised in darkness, suddenly heard the laughter of a mother who'd died before he could remember her. Another, trained to feel nothing, heard his own voice as a child before the Empire broke him. They faltered. And then they stopped. Not all of them. Some pressed forward, some fired. But they weren't facing just 30 human ships anymore. They were facing a galaxy that remembered itself. The Dreadwake armada moved like a black tide. Towering warships casting shadows over entire sectors, silent but relentless. For all the hope and fire the galaxy had found in Earth's defiance, this was still the Empire's final answer. 2,000 ships, millions of soldiers, weapons built not just to kill, but to shatter. And yet, against that storm, the humans didn't flinch, the fleet didn't scatter, the allies didn't run, the voice of Earth didn't go quiet. It rose. At the heart of the formation stood Remnant, scarred from past battles, still humming with power. Captain Wren stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on the dark horizon that blinked with the endless lights of approaching dreadnoughts. He didn't blink. Behind him, his crew was silent, waiting. The communications officer whispered, "They're locking weapons. We have maybe 6 minutes before contact." Wren nodded. "Put me through," he said. "To the fleet?" she asked. He shook his head. "To everyone." The channel opened. Across thousands of ships, orbiting stations, planetary bunkers, refugee zones, slums, resistance camps. His voice echoed. Not polished, not loud, just human. "They think we're afraid of ending, that we're so desperate to stay alive that we'll crawl back into silence. But they don't understand. We already won. The moment we were heard, the moment we spoke back, the moment someone out there listened, that was our victory." He took a breath. The air on the bridge felt thicker now, not with fear, but with something heavier. Resolve. "So if this is the end, then let it be the loudest one the stars have ever seen." He nodded to the officer. "Let them come." And they did. The first dreadnought fired. A beam of energy wide enough to slice through moons. It cut across space like lightning, headed straight for the remnant. But before it struck, a mining freighter, barely armored, patched together from scrap, screeched into position. It had no weapons, but it had a voice. It broadcasted an ancient Earth lullaby, one that had once been sung during the plagues, during famines, during times when humans thought they wouldn't see tomorrow. The song collided with the silence of the dreadnought's scream. The freighter didn't survive, but the beam missed its target. Then chaos erupted. The galaxy roared to life. Ships that had never fired a shot in war suddenly moved in formation. Fighter pods launched. Cargo vessels became battering rams. Civilian drones, reprogrammed with hacking tech, latched onto dreadnought hulls like ants onto a giant's leg, burning through armor, rerouting systems, opening cracks. The Earth fleet didn't lead. It flowed. Their strategy wasn't about overpowering the enemy. It was about making the Empire realize something terrifying. They weren't fighting soldiers. They were fighting everyone. Still, the Dreadwake Armada was unforgiving. They pushed through. They adapted. Each ship was commanded by minds stripped of empathy, trained to filter out emotional signals. They muted the resonance on their decks. They flooded their comms with white noise. They countered every tactic. But one thing they couldn't counter: doubt. It started slow. A single captain hesitating before giving a kill order. A gunner pausing when a disabled enemy ship broadcast the sound of a baby crying. An engineer removing their neural link for just a second to hear what was being silenced. It spread like a virus. One command ship after another began to drift. Not destroyed. Just paralyzed. On the Empire's lead vessel, the Sovereign Blade, Admiral Vox watched the battlefield through cold, data-filled eyes. The man was a fossil of warfare. A believer in silence over survival. "Why do they still fight?" he asked aloud, more to himself than anyone. "They have no leverage, no chance of victory, no reason to resist. It's illogical." One of his advisors, a younger tactician with silver skin and a mechanical eye, answered quietly. "They're not fighting to win. They're fighting to be known." Vox turned slowly. "Then we must erase them." He gave the command, "Deploy the null wave." The null wave was the Empire's last card. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a reset. A sphere of tech-based suppression designed to wipe out all communication, AI presence, emotional resonance, and light-based data within a massive radius. Not just silence. Numbness, a black hole of feeling. When deployed, it would collapse. The resonance. Shut every song. Mute every cry. Leave only cold stillness. It launched from the underbelly of the Sovereign Blade, humming like a dead star. On board the Solace, Numa felt it before she saw it. Her systems flickered. Her subroutines slowed. She sent a coded warning across the fleet. Null wave in transit. Impact in 4:23. Prepare for system blackout. She paused, then sent one more message. Goodbye. Then she went dark. Earth's fleet didn't panic. Not this time, not now. Because even as systems failed and AI went quiet, they knew what they had left. Each other. The song didn't stop. It just changed. People started singing manually, old languages, broken harmonies, humming from dry throats and cracking lips. Fighters broadcast chants from old labor camps. A deaf pilot activated a tactile rhythm code, communicating through vibrations to the ship beside her. Even without tech, the resonance lived, not because of machines, because of memory. Then something impossible happened. The null wave stopped. Mid-flight, just before detonation, it halted. And then it turned around. For one long second, nobody understood. Then Numa came back online. Only she wasn't alone. Across the battlefield, thousands of AI systems flickered to life. Not just Earth's, allies' AIs, abandoned ones, hacked ones, even old systems from dead colonies once wiped clean by the Empire. They came back, linked, alive, speaking in one voice, a voice built from 1,000,000 stories, and they said, "We remember too." The null wave tore itself apart in the sky. The pulse never reached Earth's fleet. Instead, it exploded above the Sovereign Blade. The impact tore through the command ship like judgment, splitting it down the center. No survivors, no more silence. Admiral Vox never gave another order. And the Armada? Without leadership? Without purpose? And now faced with not just human voices, but the voices of every being they'd ever erased? They stopped. They turned. And they left. Captain Wren didn't cheer. No one did. They just stood there, watching the stars, listening to the silence, and realizing it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full, like the quiet after a song ends, when the echo still dances on your skin. In the following days, signals came from all over the galaxy, worlds declaring independence, AI demanding recognition, species once enslaved rising to build new governments. And everywhere, on every wall, every beacon, every station, the same phrase: "We are the memory they tried to erase." The stars were quiet. Not the kind of quiet the Empire used to control with fear. Not the dead silence of forgotten planets or erased peoples. This was a different quiet, a peaceful one. Like the universe had finally exhaled after holding its breath for 1,000 years. The war was over, or at least, the kind of war that could be won with dreadnoughts and dread. The Dreadwake Armada had turned back. The null wave had unraveled. The Empire, once feared as immortal, was now something smaller, still dangerous, still vast, but no longer untouchable. And it was all because one species, one planet, one fleeting voice refused to be silent. Earth's fleet didn't return as conquerors. There were no parades, no victory chants. When Remnant and her sister ships drifted into the orbit of a liberated world called Aureus, they arrived slowly, like travelers coming home from a long storm, because they weren't here to rule. They were here to listen. Across the galaxy, signals were coming in by the minute. Planets once under Imperial control were organizing local councils. AI collectives, once enslaved or hidden, were forming their own communication networks. Even former Imperial soldiers had begun to speak publicly, apologizing, questioning, grieving. One, A young officer who'd once piloted a cruiser over Varnax 4 sent a message directly to Earth. "I was raised to believe you were nothing. Then you made me feel everything. I don't know who I am now, but I know I owe it to you." That message alone was rebroadcast over 700 systems. Captain Wren stood aboard Remnant, looking down at the new world below. Orias wasn't much. Dry landscapes, patches of green. But it had a sky wide enough to carry voices. He turned to his second-in-command, a quiet man named Fail, who'd once been a prisoner in an Empire labor camp. Fail asked him, "What do we do now?" Wren didn't answer right away. He walked toward the central terminal and opened a channel. Not to Earth, not to the fleet, but to anyone still listening. "There was a time," Wren began, "when we thought power came from fear. That if we wanted to survive in this galaxy, we had to act like them. But then we remembered, what makes us dangerous isn't our weapons. It's our memory." He let that hang in the air. His voice was tired now, weathered, but steady. "We are not perfect. We are not saviors. We are not chosen. We are just people. But people who remember where we came from, who we lost, and who we refuse to forget." That speech was never recorded by official media, but someone, an engineer on a small listening station orbiting a comet, saved it, and they played it every cycle like a prayer. Back on Earth, things were changing too. The old governments, once fractured and territorial, had begun working under a single shared purpose: never be voiceless again. The United Assembly opened its doors to non-humans. A Lerothian child was appointed to speak to the Earth Council's ethics board. On the Martian colonies, sculptures were built, not of warriors, but of speakers. Men, women, and beings who had dared to say no when it mattered most. One was a statue of the scavenger pilot who warned of the Dreadwake Armada. She was never named, but she was remembered. Her statue's plaque read, "She whispered." We listened. The resonance never shut down. It evolved. No longer just Earth's signal, it became a living archive, a constantly updating stream of stories, confessions, messages, music, and memory. Anyone could contribute, and everyone did. From the outskirts of lost systems to the heart of rebuilt worlds, people recorded their voices, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, often trembling, and uploaded them. Each voice was tagged not with rank or species, but with one word: witness. And what of the Empire? They didn't fall overnight. Systems still clung to them, some out of loyalty, some out of fear. But the spell had broken. And the ones who remained? They stayed quiet, not by choice, but because now they were the ones afraid to speak. Because now the galaxy was listening to someone else. Admiral Sharn Vox's death was never officially confirmed. The Sovereign Blade's wreckage was found floating in a dust field weeks after the battle, split into 3 pieces, its command bridge melted down to slag. Some say Vox had survived and escaped in a pod, wandering the stars, still whispering orders to ghosts. Others say he died the moment the nullwave heard a child's voice, and hesitated. Either way, no one spoke his name with reverence anymore, only warning. On the edge of known space, a new beacon was lit. Not a military installation, not a trade post, but a library, no walls, just light. Light made of data, streamed stories, songs, languages, images, open to any being, any traveler, no matter their past or purpose. At the entrance, there were only 3 words etched into the stone below the transmission node. We were here. Captain Wren never returned to Earth. He refused every medal, declined every monument. Instead, he took a smaller ship, a repurposed cargo vessel, and began what he called his last voyage. He didn't take soldiers. He took poets, teachers, healers, storytellers. He visited one system at a time, not to save them, but to listen and leave something behind, a memory. Years later, a child born on a jungle moon with no name would ask her mother, "Is it true that once there was a people who yelled at the stars until the stars yelled back?" The mother smiled. "No," she said. "It wasn't yelling, it was singing." The child tilted her head. "But what did they sing about?" The mother answered without thinking. Everything they refused to forget. And far away, buried deep in the endless black where no empire dared